So yesterday I saw a tweet from Eddie Trunk that said that Jake E. Lee had been shot, and shot 3 times, apparently down in Vegas. Now, the Audio Mover studio where we broadcast from here is actually less than 2 hours away from Las Vegas. And so anyway, I got up this morning, checked CNN, and saw that he's expected to fully recover. And so I thought it'd be interesting today to, thinking about Jake E. Lee, to do a little bit of research, go back, find some articles from the early days when he first was with Ozzy. And I think you're going to find this stuff really, really fascinating. Of course, for most of us, I think the first time we ever even heard of Jake E. Lee was when he joined Ozzy and was on this album. This is my copy of Bark at the Moon. And when you look on the inside here, there's actually a picture of the group, and there's Jake E. Lee right there. Jake E. Lee, before joining Ozzy, had been in kind of an early version of Rough Cut and Rat, but what wasn't really well known. And then Ozzy, of course, needed to replace Randy Rhoads, but then he needed to replace Brad Gillis. You may know the story. But what happened was, of course, Randy Rhoads, who'd been on Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, died in a plane accident. Then Ozzy put out a live album right after that with just a bunch of Black Sabbath covers, and he got Brad Gillis from Night Ranger to come play on that live record with him. And then there was this big thing, who's now going to play with Ozzy, because Randy Rhoads is gone. And Randy Rhoads was this guitar god, and so then we heard that there's this guy, Jake E. Lee. I'd never heard of him, and I was a young guy, and most people hadn't. And then we heard this album was coming out called Bark at the Moon, and then Jake E. Lee was going to be on it. So we're going to take a quick look at this article on CNN, and then I'm going to take you into this really cool flash from the past that I think you're really going to like here. So just to get the information out on Jake E. Lee real quick. Jake E. Lee, former Ozzy Osbourne guitarist, expected to fully recover after being shot multiple times. Okay, CNN. Rock guitarist Jake E. Lee, who's played with heavy metal heavyweight Ozzy Osbourne, was hospitalized Tuesday morning after he was shot multiple times in Las Vegas. A representative for the musician told CNN in a statement. Hey, hold on for just a second. We'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. Quote, Lee is fully conscious and doing well in an intensive care unit at a Las Vegas hospital. He is expected to fully recover, the representative said. The shooting occurred while Lee was outside walking his dog and believed to be completely random. According to a statement from the Las Vegas Metro Police Department, officers responded to a shooting incident in the 11,000 block of Alora Street around 2:42 a.m. on Tuesday. Quote, officers arrived and located a male victim suffering from apparent gunshot wounds. The male was transported to the hospital, the statement read. The investigation is ongoing. No arrests have been made at this time, police said. Lee, 67, so Jake E. Lee is 67 years old, is a veteran rock guitarist, having spent time playing with Osbourne in the 80s. Lee later founded the heavy metal group Badlands with former Black Sabbath members Ray Gillen and Eric Singer. He formed his own band Red Dragon Cartel in 2013. Following news of the shooting, friends and fans took to social media Tuesday to wish the musician a smooth recovery. I sometimes forget about that connection with Eric Singer. That he's in, because anyway, Badlands is kind of a big deal, and I just kind of, I'm a Kiss fan, so I always think of Eric Singer as a member of, well, whatever. That's a whole nother story. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is really cool. What I thought, because so many of us, the first time we were introduced to him was Bark at the Moon, I thought what I'm going to do is go back and do a little bit of research back into the early 80s, 1983, 1984, and see if I can find some articles about this record and about this time period, maybe a review or something that would at least mention Jake E. Lee or talk about this time period. And I found some really, really interesting stuff. So the first thing I'm going to show you is actually a record review. And this is called Roston's Review by Mitchell Roston. This came out in the Carnegie Courier, Thursday, February 23rd, 1984. Now, why February of 1984? Well, Bark at the Moon came out in 83, but it was the very, very end of 83. So a lot of the feedback on the album was kind of bled over into the next year, which was 1984. And this is actually a fun little article. So here he starts out. There's a minor connection between Ozzy Osbourne and the group Quiet Riot. Several years ago, Ozzy Osbourne's lead guitarist was Randy Rhoads, whose lead and vibrant playing were a large part of Osbourne's premier solo success. And you cannot overemphasize that enough. One of the things that really made Ozzy take off when he did his solo album, because you got to remember, Black Sabbath was kind of washed up. Ozzy was kicked out. He was kind of known as a drunk and kind of irresponsible, and no one could even imagine really him having a serious future. And then he picks up Randy Rhoads, who's this hotshot, amazing guitar player. I mean, just revolutionary, still respected today kind of guitar player. But a young guy, and then died young. And he even mentions that here. Rhoads died about a year ago in a private plane accident. So remember, this is written in 1984. He had been the lead guitarist with Quiet Riot. Now, this is something interesting, and maybe a lot of people watching this would already know, but the original guitar player for Quiet Riot was Randy Rhoads. And Ozzy took Randy from Quiet Riot to be on that first Ozzy album, and he ended up being on Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, and actually toured with him on those as well. And so anyway, but Randy Rhoads originally was with Kevin DuBrow in Quiet Riot. And they had a couple different albums out, and then of course Carlos Cavazo came in and replaced Randy Rhoads, and then they became huge, famous, and the rest is history. Quiet Riot now has a new musician, Carlos Cavazo, and has a 3 million album sales success. Yes, so Metal Health went on, that's the one that had the song Metal Health and Come On Feel the Noise and Slick Black Cadillac and what have you, that Carlos Cavazo on. But, by the way, just an interesting note, Slick Black Cadillac had actually been part of the Quiet Riot repertoire prior to Carlos Cavazo. So that was a Randy Rhoads Quiet Riot song. All right, so getting back to Jake E. Lee. Jake E. Lee is Osbourne's new guitarist, and he plays on the new record, Bark at the Moon. He is on a tour that recently came to town for the show at the Burn Meadowlands Arena, the Nassau Coliseum, and Madison Square Garden. Lee brought a different style to Osbourne's music. More flash, but consistent rhythm and lead playing were the highlights of his performances. Now, understanding Jake E. Lee, it's a tall order to walk in and replace Randy Rhoads. I mean, it's nearly impossible. So here's this guy that really nobody's ever heard of. Jake E. Lee comes in, and then he plays on this album, Bark at the Moon, and everybody, that's the first song that we hear. And how does he compare to Randy Rhoads? Well, he doesn't really. And as he kind of says here, he brings his own thing. Actually, I want to keep going here because he drives home something really important. More flash, but consistent rhythm. And I want to say something about that in a second. Comparisons to his predecessor are going to be made, but all guitarists are different in some respects. And Lee is a good choice to fill Rhoads' spotlight. Okay. When he says rhythm, one of the things, as some of you know, I was a professional musician for a long time. I'm a guitar player. And one of the things I realized a long, long time ago is that there are so many guitar players out there that are great lead guitar players that can play solos. I mean, the 80s actually got a little bit silly, in my opinion, because it seemed like every time you turned around, there's some new guitar whiz that could, look how fast he can play, and look at this, and then this guy had two. I mean, it just got so, it became kind of a parody of itself. It got so ridiculous, kind of like singers that who can sing higher and higher and higher and higher, and then faster and faster and faster on the guitar, so which culminated, in my opinion, with somebody like Vinnie Vincent on his solo album, where I was just so focused on playing fast that it just started sounding like somebody's vomiting out notes, and it lost all. There was no artistic anything to it. It was just noise at that point. So I learned early on that almost anybody can learn how to play solo guitar, but very few guitar players, really master rhythm playing. And Jake E. Lee, go back Go back today and listen to the song Bark at the Moon. Digga, 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 digga. He does so much stuff. And the solo in the song is great. I mean, it's great. It's memorable. It's really good. But get to the end of the song and listen to the solos he plays at the end. I mean, and you listen to several different times in the song, even just the intro. I'm singing it to you, but you know the part if you've heard the song. And then even in the bridges, I can't remember how the bridge goes, but right before the choruses, "Bark at the Moon," all these spots, digga, 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 you'll hear this rhythm that he does, and he's so good at that. There are so few people that understand rhythm and can and take that guitar and just get that and hit on those notes. And you'll hear it's understanding the 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, all the E's and the U's, and he's got them down. And when he plays these notes, he emphasizes right on the perfect. I mean, he's so good. And it's not just because he's a good solo player, because like I said, I learned early on, just about anybody can learn how to be a good guitar solo player by just mastering all the scales, coordinating your fingers. It's very few people. I've played with a lot of guitarists and bassists in my life who have no rhythm and have never mastered it. And if you don't have rhythm, you don't have a song. And this guy, when he made that comment kind of in passing, and he says, more flash, but consistent rhythm and lead playing were highlights of his performances. Jake E. Lee is a master at the one thing that so many of the guitarists that you love, that are these incredibly fast, technical, whatever wizards, can't do rhythm well. And Jake E. Lee is a master at that. Listen to Bark at the Moon, the entire song, and listen to all the digga, 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 the stuff that he's doing in there that is rock solid and it's tasteful. He's amazing at that. And that's a very, very important thing, in my opinion. Okay, so let's see here. There's also the case of Carmine Appice as Osbourne's new drummer. Appice, a Long Island-born musician who recently finished up a stint with Rod Stewart, added solid percussion to the group set. Two good musicians and a host of others all made for a decent backup section for leader and showman John Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy, who has made headlines for his strange antics, has mellowed out a bit by marrying his manager and daughter of the president of his record label, cutting his hair and wearing nice clothes for promotional photos. Did all that turn him into Pat Boone of rock? Nope. But he has a great stage presence with plenty of theatrics and fine vocals as well. I didn't finally see him in concert. I was a young guy here when this came out. I didn't finally see him in concert till the 90s. And I think I saw him the first time on the No More Tours tour, which was his last tour 20 tours ago or something. I'd be interested to hear if you saw Ozzy on any one of these tours, especially the Bark at the Moon with Jake E. Lee, what that was like, because that's what he's talking about here. In performance, Osbourne gave his audience plenty of rock vocals and physical communication on stage. His presence was interesting and dramatic, while his singing blended well with the melodies. More of a limited range vocalist, he nonetheless succeeded in displaying the tunes he knew best. It worked well enough for him to sell out 3 shows in this area alone. There were new selections done from his release, Bark at the Moon, including the title track and also Suicide Solution, while not forgetting oldies like Crazy Train, Iron Man, Paranoid. Of course, those two from Black Sabbath, Crazy Train from his first solo album. The last 2 being crowd pleasers for Osbourne's former group, Black Sabbath. All were done with a hard rock fashion that Appice, guitarist Lee, and Osbourne all assisted in. They were 3 evenings full of music and horror, but all in the name of fun. Okay, so that's a cool little interesting review. Now, this one's really cool. This is another review from a concert that would have taken place later on that summer, July 4th, it says here. And this article is called Ozzy Osbourne Ear-Splitting July 4th. All right. So again, just looking back at this period, since we're thinking about Jake E. Lee, and wanted to just share some of these things with you, because I find this stuff super fascinating. By Michael St. John, music writer. Ozzy Osbourne has the reputation of making every day seem like Halloween, but his show at the Coliseum Thursday night, augmented by his most lavish set design ever, more closely rivaled the 4th of July. And again, if you saw this tour, please make comments, leave notes. I'm super curious about this, what it was like being there at this moment, especially when things were changing, because Jake E. Lee is now in the band. He'd gone through the Brad Gillis thing briefly, and now we're kind of back on stable footing, touring, new album, etc. The stage, built into a huge wooden balcony with an expansive staircase in the center, was no small-time construction project. In full black Dracula regalia, Osbourne appeared at the top of and descended the stairs, swathed in enough fog to cover a small city, while 8,900 hard rock fans welcomed him like a conquering hero. Tongues of flame shot into the air. The band materialized from the shadows, and I Don't Know, the hit that effectively launched Osbourne's post-Black Sabbath career, exploded from the sound system like a thunderstorm looking for revenge. It took a while for technicians to get the barrage under control. Osbourne's lone voice was never much competition in the decibel derby. I remember that actually about a lot of concerts that you'd go see. It's gotten better over the years, but for some reason, back in the 80s especially, you'd go to concerts and it seemed like it took 2 or 3 songs before the sound guys had the sound dialed in, which is so strange considering they had sound check a few hours earlier. But anyway, that's kind of what he's talking about here. It took a while for technicians to get the barrage under control. Osbourne's lone voice was never much competition in the decibel derby, but this crowd came bent for metal, and Osbourne's outfit delivered a payload that would make an MX missile sound like a popped balloon in comparison. Drummer Tommy Aldridge pounded out the, I don't even know how you say that word, pay-in to Aleister Crowley, as Don Airey and his keyboard gear rose from within the structure to join him on the upper deck. Bassist Bob Daisley and guitarist Jake E. Lee flanked Osbourne at stage level, and the ominous tune ended with a succession of fireworks overhead. A full spectrum of lights, many of the mobile variety, kept the stage bathed in eerie shades of and regularly shifted to illuminate the audience. Showers of sparks were also a regular feature. For sheer theatricality, the overall effect was outstanding. Aside from 2 enormous mechanical bats and a pair of monkeys perched on the railings, there were no animals in the show. Again, if you saw the show, please leave notes about, do you remember this stuff? Those looking for torture, however, needed only to wait for Lee's solo in Suicide Solution. And this part, I love how he put this right here. This is so much fun. If there was a society for the prevention of cruelty to guitar strings with legal powers, Lee would have earned himself a life sentence. He covered all the licks made familiar by the late Randy Rhoads, and still had plenty of his own to offer. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but his, not just plucking out notes, but his ability to control that instrument and lay down solid rhythms that sound like a kind of like a car engine pushing you forward. He's so good at that. Just the rhythmic thing. He's awesome. Let's see. The breakneck pace of Journey to the Center of Eternity led to Aldridge's showcase as the stairs parted and his drum stand glided toward the crowd, returning to position only after he had tossed away his sticks and taken the kit to task with his bare hands. Oh yeah, that's right. That's an Aldridge thing that he may have gotten from, because Bonham used to do that too. He'd play the drums with his hands for a minute. From then on, it was a blast furnace full of Osbourne's hottest stuff. Vocally, the heavy metal madman has never been mistaken for a smooth crooner, but he has sounded less strained in the past. Essentially, it was the magnitude of his presentation that carried it off. And then they mentioned that Motley Crue had opened up on this tour. And that's how they wrap it up. And he really is. Ozzy Osbourne, love him or hate him as a singer and what have you, but he knows how to get in front of an audience and just keep the energy going. Because I've seen him in concert. I actually saw Black Sabbath on their last tour, And Ozzy, same thing. There's just something about the way he moves around that stage. It just kind of, is trying to get everybody just constantly energy is kind of remarkable that he has that ability in him. Anyway, so this was thinking about Jake E. Lee again. I thought it'd be fun to just go back and read a couple of these things, thinking about Bark at the Moon. And from what really, when you go back and listen to some of the interviews with Jake E. Lee and others, he really was the guy that made this album happen. These songs really were Jake's songs. He wrote this stuff. He put all this stuff together. He was the brains behind this, and the guy is so talented and so good. And of course, we wish him well. That's an awful thing to go through. It sounds like he's going to be fine, but you don't. What an awful thing to have happen to you. Anyway, just want to wish him well with this video. And with that, of course, please follow the channel, like the video, share this with other people that know Ozzy or that are fans of Jake E. Lee, etc. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.